This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, the sound of falling leaves and the crisp winds of autumn sweeping across the Northwest. This week, I am joined by the one and only Paloma Deerfield.
Hello, hello, hello.
And our very special guest for this week's episode, Asia Simone.
Hello.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm so excited to talk comic books with the both of you. Mostly because it has been an incredibly long week, and I read so many comic books over the last 24 hours, I just had to get caught up. So I guess before we get into all of that, we have a very special guest. And actually, I have a quick announcement. I want to shout out to our friend Keith, who found the IRCB in issue number 30 of Ice Cream Man. Keith, you combed through the pages, and you found the very secret, intricate, tiny little letters that Martin Morazzo left for us in that issue. I'm so pleased. I showed this off to the guy at my local comic book shop that I went to yesterday, and he couldn't believe it. Like, he was running up and down the aisles with excitement because he's like, artists never do that. So he was very, very pleased by it. But shout out to Keith who found it. I've already sent you an email. You're probably going to get a free comic book for something. But we have a special guest here this week. Asia, you are here on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. For the folks that maybe don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing?
Yes. Well, hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. My name's Asia Simone. I'm a comic artist from Philadelphia. I currently live in California. I'm in Anaheim. I teach full-time. I teach high school digital design. And I've been kind of making my way into comics for the past couple years now. And my first comic book deal was with Marvel and Scholastics doing the Girl and Devil Dinosaur Wreck and Roll graphic novel that came out this April, aligned with the Girl TV show. And now that that's out, I got some other stuff I'm working on, some other things coming up. So I'm excited.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. I'm very excited to talk more about what you're going to be working on after and what you did to make Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur work. But we have a legally mandated thing that we have to do on this show, and that's talk about comic books. So I have two mandated questions that I have to ask, and that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Paloma, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Well, Mike, I've been great. Really excited to be here with Asia and be on the podcast again. I'm pretty dang stoked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a similar boat with you where I, too, was like, I need to catch up on my pulls. I desperately need to catch up on my pulls. However, the comic that I'm going to be talking about today is not from my pull list. It just caught my eye on the shelves of my local comic shop, and that is Dog Days by Kumsuk Gendry Kim. And this author had previously written some maybe more like heavier topic graphic novels. There's a graphic novel called Grass that I believe she wrote, and that's, I think, been really well received. Dog Days is from Drawn and Quarterly, so you know they publish really cool stuff.
Yeah.
This book is kind of like the author getting into like semi-autobio comics, where we follow a woman named Yuna and her husband who adopt a cute little corgi named Carrot, and kind of like exploring life as dog owners who move from Seoul out to the countryside, and just kind of seeing the treatment of dogs from like city folk, young city folk, to kind of like older generation out in the country who maybe grew up under like a different lifestyle. So it's like the author kind of reconciling what she's seeing in the countryside with, as she's like getting like, she gets a second puppy named Potato, and then eventually a third dog who they named Choco. They were almost going to name it Onion, so I got a little confused. I forgot for a sec, but
Sure. I mean, you got to keep it on theme,
exactly.
right?
But it was pretty moving. How can it not be when it's about dogs? All the dogs that Yuna, our main character, has, they're all okay in the end. But the line art was like gorgeous. It's just black and white, beautiful inks. The dogs' faces are so expressive, and we get like the inner commentary of our main character just trying to like reconcile with like, oh, I can only take care of so many dogs, but I don't want to abandon you. I just highly recommend, if you like dogs, just beautiful little work of art, and an like cultural insight into how maybe like other countries like handle pets and their view on pets. Yeah.
Interesting. How did you came across this at your local comic book shop? Seems like a very like slightly out there pull, if only because Drawn and Quarterly, I feel like, is like a publisher that only gets like pulled into comic book shops because like a book is like an award winner or something like that. So it's so cool that your shop is like pulling these books just like regularly, just because maybe they sound
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, this looks amazing. Just looking at like just some of the cover art looks
Hmm.
incredible. I I always worry with books that are about like pets and stuff, whether or not they're going to be like super sad. This doesn't
Yeah.
have like a super sad turn to it, does it?
No, not a super sad turn. I think there's like the general sadness of being like, oh, some people out in the country don't treat their dogs very well and maybe use
Mm.
them for other things. Um, but otherwise, no, not a sad turn. And there's a pretty like short and sweet, like informative author's note. Because the author she does have a dog named Carrot and a dog named Potato, and then the dog Choco. Those are actually hers.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
but she had talked about her fear of like writing this about this kind of like theme because it's just such a negative stereotype in like
Mm.
East Asian countries and like the relationship with dogs. But she felt pretty proud of herself to tell the story.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Very cool. Well, I'll have to look this up beyond that. But Asia, let's talk about what you've been up to. How have you been? How have comic books been? What have you been reading?
I've been pretty great. Just kind of got finished with my convention tour for this year. My first time doing convention, so it's been great. Meeting a ton of people.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And in terms of what I'm reading, so I'm actually reading The Principles of Necromancy by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly. And I was first introduced to it when I first met both Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly at LA Comic Con just a few weeks back. And they had it on
Nice.
their table, and I was looking at it. And artistically, it's not my usual thing. If you look at my art, I'm very like cutesy, animation centric, and this is
Mm-hmm.
very gritty and gruesome, and just very much like artistically not usually my thing, but story wise, I'm very much into. I am into horror and psychological horror. So it's this story of this doctor that has claimed to beat immortality, and that is turning people into monsters. And the kind of psychological horror that is being dealt with in this story, it's so impressive and fascinating. Very much up my alley. I very much love like psychological horror. The art is just absolutely stunning. It's done by Iman Winkle, and that was what first caught me, was kind of looking at the art and seeing how well it was done and how intentional like the compositions were. um, and one thing that Jackson said that I thought was really interesting, he said like it's very gory, but it's not gory for gory's sake. Like it's not this kind of like almost like fetishization of goriness. It's very
Sure.
intentional to the story, and I felt like I could tell just looking at the panels. So I was just pretty much like, okay, I think I'm gonna get this. And then I read it, and I was like, oh, now I'm gonna tell everyone about it because it's absolutely amazing. It's so fascinating. I've only read the first issue, so I have to get the rest, but it's just been a great time. I really love it, and it's something new in my catalog. So I'm excited.
Yeah, no, that's just, I was looking at some of the preview pages and this book looks gorgeous. Oh my gosh. Like I see the gore on the cover alone. It seems like you know what you're kind of getting into, but yeah, wow, this looks incredible. Holy smokes.
Very, very beautifully done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I don't know what issue I was looking at the first time I saw it, but there was just like this wonderful, like long, very elongated panel of these two people talking across a cell bars.
Mhm.
And it was like two panels of each of the characters. You just get this nice elongated shot. Everything about it was like, oh, you can tell this person like is just putting so much effort into the quality of art that they're putting out, and that's what impressed me.
Dude, we love to see it. We love to see it. Well, let me talk about a book that I've been reading. I guess, as I said, I think I was saying this before to you guys before we started recording. I went to a concert this weekend, and my hearing is a little rough. I went to go see Black Dahlia Murder and Dying Fetus in Philadelphia, which like I I sometimes like to see very heavy metal bands, and yeah, it was a great show. Except for like the last three songs of Black Dahlia set, I took out my earplugs, and I'm really starting to regret it. But nonetheless, incredible show, incredible time. And yeah, so I did sit down and read some comic books finally. It's just been like a whirlwind of like Halloween stuff, Black Dahlia murder, and just I went to the framing store and I got my framed Martin Simmons page from Department of Truth finally back. It looks gorgeous. It's going to go up on my wall right over here. And so I finally sat down and read some comic books. We got this book in from Abrams Comic Arts. They have like this imprint called Kana, where they're starting to bring over some manga from maybe smaller publishers in Japan. And so we got this book called Leviathan, it's volume 1. It's written and drawn by Shiro Kuroi. It's a space horror about the last days of a group of students on a traveling vessel from a colony back to Earth. All we know is that this ship has been lost for a long while, and the only record is a journal kept by one of the students on the ship. So it's very like, what's going on here? We get through this one kid's lens, like, what happened to the ship? And there is a little bit of a question of the reliableness of the narrator here, which I like, because you're kind of putting that in question as we flash back and forth between the salvagers who have found this ship and are reading through the journal going like, this kid must have been making this stuff up. There's no way that actually happened. And then you see some sort of variation on what was just described to us in real life. Really, really interesting. It's begging the question, what actually happened over and over and over. And I thought this was going to be a really simple story. Because I think when it was pitched in the email from Abrams, they said that, this is like just a Leviathan. That's all it's called. But I realized it's volume 1. So I thought the story was going to be simple about like, something bad happened. Everybody turns on each other and that's the end of the story. But as the story progresses, it gets more and more complicated. It reminds me of like the ridiculous like amp up of something like a Death Note, where like for some reason the story gets unnecessarily every single chapter. But I like it. Like it's, where the end of this story is going. So like at the end of it, we know that the ship is lost and it's salvaged, but there is a big, huge question mark at the center of the story that gets revealed at the very beginning that by the end of volume 1 does not get answered. And I'm so hooked on this book. Like it was 99 pages. I blew through it in a sitting and I'm totally into it. The art in this book is incredible as well. Kuroi's art style is like heavy hashing and shading and so like the first couple of pages we get these very beautifully painted color pages that like show off the ship in space, like totally flexing like this artist's muscle in terms of creating texture and like the kind of like openness and horror of space. And then the rest of the book is just in black and white, but the amount of detail on some of these pages is just, it floored me. This must be like a monthly comic or something in Japan, because there's no way you're pumping out this level of detail and just beauty and sheer ink. Like the amount of inks on some of the pages was just overwhelming to me. So really, really like this. The major beats of this story, they put like every single stroke down intentionally in such a beautiful way that like you can see where they cared more about a page than another page, because it's like so intense what's happening. So if you're looking for like another manga that's not just like a shonen series, this book, while it feels very simple because it's kind of like a simple space horror, really threw me for the loop. By the end of the first volume, I was like, I don't know how this book possibly ends in any way that is satisfactory, but I must know. I must know more. So looking forward to the next volume. But this Leviathan volume 1 is super, super good.
The art looks amazing.
Yes.
I know, right? Oh, can't recommend it just to look at it.
Yeah, I've never seen such clean cross hatching in my entire life. It's very, very neat cross hatching.
Yeah. That was the thing that impressed me, is just like the first chapter alone is just like so detailed. I was like just blown away by it. I had to at least see where the story was going to go. So, I mean, Asia, I guess if you're looking for more like psychological horror stuff, this one could be for you.
Very much. Yeah, listening to it, I'm like, okay, I like this.
Sick. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about comics that are on the top of our pile, whether they are new or old or just something you're trying to get off your bookshelf. I want to shout out some of the people that are listening live with us today on our Discord. They're reading a bunch of different things. CK is going to be reading What's the Furthest Place from Here, Volume 3. Hugh is going to be reading Saga number 70. I'm also going to be reading Saga number 70. Emmett is going to be reading Corto Maltese, Ballad of the Salt Sea by Hugo Pratt. Brian's going to be reading The Hunger in the Dusk, Volume 1. Oh my, I really need to reread that story because, it's so good. Such good fantasy. And Peyton is going to be reading Berserk Volume 1 and 2. Godspeed to you, Peyton. Good luck. Have fun. Please let us know how that is. But let's kick things back over to you, Asia. What is on the top of your pile? What are you going to be reading next?
So I had started Something is Killing the Children, by, yeah, James Tinian. And I've been told it's just like an amazing series. And so I got the first one and I started reading it. I just have a bad habit of like starting stuff and not getting anywhere. So I got to get back
Sure.
to reading it. But I'm very impressed, as someone who like wants to also start writing and become an author as well. Very impressed with like the pacing of the book and um, how well it read and how much information we got through in just like a few chapters. It very much feels like the first time watching Stranger Things. Um, and I
Hmm.
get a lot of that energy from this book, which I absolutely love. And I love like the coloring and just how much everything about the art adds to the atmosphere of the book and the mystery. And it almost has this like sense of like badassery to it as well. Like there's just so much about it that's like so fun. So I'm super excited to get back to that. And then obviously I got to finish, or I got to get the rest of the Principles of Necromancy. I got to get the rest of those. So I've only seen the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
issue. I feel like, oh, and I didn't get started on it yet. The last thing I just wanted to start was what is it? I'm not gonna get it mixed up. I want to say, is it Justice Academy? I'm not messing this up, right?
Is it Strange Academy?
No, for the DC series. Is it?
Oh, is
Oh,
it Gotham Academy?
No. What is it?
What am I thinking
Titans
of?
Academy.
That's what. Okay, I was gonna say that at first. It's Titans Academy.
Tight. Okay.
Yeah.
Now
So
we're going into territory that I'm not familiar with. Paloma, I'm leaving this to you. This is all you now.
yeah, I mean, I'll just say like honestly, like there's so much of. I shouldn't say there's so much of DC and Marvel I have not read. So I'm like, I saw all
That's
the
okay.
yeah, I saw Titans Academy, and I was like, this seems up my alley. So I want to get into it, but I haven't even touched it yet. So I want to start that.
See, you put the word academy on like any title of anything, and I'm like,
Right.
could I read a story about kids in school? Because I'm immediately drawn to that for some
Same,
reason, right?
same.
Like Strange Academy was exactly like that, where I was just like, oh, it's a bunch of the weirdos of the Marvel universe who use magic. I'm in, count me in, 100%, 1000%.
Umbrella
And it
Academy.
turns out that book, Umbrella Academy, right? Turns out Strange Academy rules. It's start to finish. It is incredible, and it breaks my heart that there isn't more of it. Oh, it's only one shots. They're getting the Runaways treatment. If you guys remember, the whole Runaways series happened, and then it's like anytime the Runaways would show up, it was just like a one shot during events. And that seems to be what's happening with Strange Academy. And it breaks my heart because I just love those kids so damn much. But okay, Something is Killing the Children, Titans Academy. Those sound like great books to be starting on. Mostly because Something Killing the Children, I know, is like this huge thing to the point where they've got the House of Slaughter books. So you've got some really good stuff ahead of you, I think, Asia. Well, for me, I'm looking forward to this brand new book that's dropping. Dropped last week, drops this week. FML. This is by Kelly Sue DeConnick, art by David Lopez, colors by Chris Peter, and letters by our good pal Clayton Coles. It's Kelly Sue DeConnick, so of course I'm going to pick it up. Her name is on the book. I must own it. That is just how these things work. I don't have a choice in it, and I really wish that I did. But the solicit for this book is interesting. Riley is a teen that sketches out his heavy metal future with a ballpoint pen between monster movies and band practice, but musical stardom needs to compete with high school, the temper of a former Riot Girl mother, the morbid obsessions of a goth sister, and the eccentricities of bandmates that threaten to drive him and everyone around him insane. The balance gets harder after a ritual during a party in Portland's Forest Park causes him to wake up one day to discover that the creatures, witchcraft, and metal world that he's been obsessed with may be a bit closer to home than he preferred. And, I just love a good story about magic and fantasy or supernatural things just coming to life. I don't know what Kelly Sue and David Lopez are going to be doing with this book, but I'm in. It's an 8-issue miniseries. This is going to be a banger. I don't know what to say. If you're not picking this up, what are you doing with your time and your life? It's Kelly Sue DeConnick writing a comic book, everybody. Come on. But I'm just very hyped. I love the premise of this. Love this creative team. David Lopez did some work on X-Men Blue and All New Wolverine, so I'm immediately in because love the look of those series. And yeah, like I said, it's a miniseries, so I'm totally all for it. I don't know if you guys are hyped about this book at all, but I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
100% in.
To be honest, I'm looking at the cover and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are gorgeous. Like it's such a pretty fun looking like story. It also gives like obviously I haven't read it, and it's not that it's the same like genre per se, but as someone coming from like my love for like Giant Days with Boom Studios, I love like the kind of like fun teen energy that I'm getting from this. I'm like, it feels like that plus like Scott Pilgrim. Like I'm just getting a lot of like, fun energy. So I'm excited.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see characters with those nice round mouths and screaming and like big expressive eyes, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh man, this is gonna be fun, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Cool. Well, Paloma, why don't you wrap us up here? Why don't you tell us what is on the top of your pile this week?
Top of my pile is Nightwing 119. It's the kickoff issue for like the new creative team of Dan Waters and Dexter Soy. I read all the, I think, 40 issues of the Tom Taylor Nightwing run that kind of reset some previous things for the character, got him in a good spot in the DCU. I enjoyed the run. I don't know how many people liked it, but I thought it was a good like resetting of the status quo after he lost his memories and became Rick Grayson. So I feel like
Rick.
it was maybe a necessary run. But
Yeah.
this one sounds cool. It's kind of just back in like the Bloodhaven status quo for all like the gangs have been shaken up, and so I think Nightwing is gonna have to redefine what he's like capable of doing or what he needs to do to save like the city. So I'm excited to see this like new art style. Dexter, so I think has done some stuff with like Red Hood, Green Lantern. So I think he's really good with like action stuff, and this feels like very action packed. So I'm stoked.
Yeah, Dexter Soy is not to be trifled with. Like that guy's art is incredible. He makes really really cool looking superhero comic books. So yeah, I'm sure this will be good. Dan Waters is also pretty fun too. So now you've given me the sign off to say, Mike, you can go read Tom Taylor's entire Nightwing run because now it's done, which is great. I can jump into my DC Universe Infinite and I can just blast through 40 issues. That's great to hear. Asia, are you a big DC fan or Marvel fan? I know you said you haven't read a lot, but do you have a preference over one or the other?
I mean, I feel like I'm gonna annoy so many. I'm an MCU fan.
Let's go. No, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
I very much fell in love with the MCU starting from Iron Man. And technically before, like I've watched the Hulks and stuff when they came out. But I'm a big MCU fan, and like I know it's cool to hate on the MCU, but I still got hope out. I'm still excited about different projects. I'm very much like a open minded, like also as someone who comes from like I always tell on myself, but as someone who comes from like a love of fan fiction, like I'm always just here for like trying new stuff and like let's put these characters over here. And so like I'm always still invested, even if things aren't always the best. I'm like, that's okay. We'll see what happens next time. I just can't wait to see what comes out next.
Okay.
So, but in terms of comics, again, there's so little that I haven't read enough yet. But you know, in meeting more artists and seeing things that they've been working on, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of things I'm very much am interested in. So yeah, so I don't know. I don't really know on the comic side which I have a preference. I will say the Double Trouble series from Marvel has my heart. I'm so obsessed with Thor and Loki Double Trouble. I like it's like the best thing I've ever read. So anything that if I could get more of that in the superhero space, I would definitely be very happy because I think it's so fun.
I mean, they did a Spider-Man Double Trouble, right, with Peter Parker and Miles Morales. So, also an option. But I mean, and that's totally fine. So were you a big fan of the What If series then? Did you watch all of that? Are you excited for the new season that they're going to do?
I didn't really watch all of it.
No, that's okay because neither did I. I only watched a couple episodes because I was like, I don't know if this is for me. But
Yeah.
I'm just trying to like, poke and prod. I just want to see where you're at with things.
But I feel like a lot of my answers are going to be I started this thing and I need to try and like get back to it. But I started watching X-Men 97, which I thought was absolutely amazing. I just didn't finish it, but very much amazed by it. Like from like episode 1 or 2, I was like, oh, I can tell this is amazing. So I'm just excited about a lot of projects.
Sure.
I need to get to Agatha All Along. I haven't started it yet, but I want to. Yeah, I would say like I'm very invested on like that side of MCU animation and the movies and the shows. Like I'm just excited to like consume more. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, then I guess in that case, outside of the newer stuff, and it's okay. We are huge proponents of like everybody's got a backlog. We're all behind. No one's up to date. Like Paloma and I both said, we're still trying to get caught up on our pull list. So I 100% understand. Do you have like a favorite? I guess I'm just diving right into blind questions that I did not put any planning for. So I hope you're ready to just answer on the spot. But do you have an MCU property that you love the most then? I guess is there, like you said, you like Iron Man and stuff, but is there like a movie that you prefer one over anything else?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm very much a big fan of like Iron Man 1, but I'm also a very huge fan of the first Loki series. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, anything involving Loki, I'm pretty ecstatic about, which is why I also love the Thor and Loki Double Trouble um, issue.
Yeah.
But I would say Iron Man number one, the End Game, and what's the one that came before End Game? What am I getting
Infinity
these?
War.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Mm,
Infinity War.
yeah.
Those are always like easy to go back to and just enjoy. Um, I would say those are probably my tops because they're the ones I'd want to go back to the most. Are those movies? Yeah.
Cool. Cool. No, that's great. I mean, like, as someone who is like very hit or miss with a lot of the MCU, it's not like I haven't watched it all, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not like I'm not like secretly obsessed with it all because I must know, right? Like I've been on this journey since 2009 or whatever. I have to keep going. I'm a comic book fan. I just can't stop being connected to this thing. Like
Yeah.
with the exception of things like X-Men where I'm just like frustrated. But
Hmm.
that's a totally different subject. Um
Yeah.
but so you said you watched a little bit of X-Men 97. I
Yeah.
guess like I have to ask, what did you like about it? Do you have any characters that you like more than others in that show?
That's a good question. I would say what I liked about it. I was very impressed by which I guess is very common for like maybe X Men, but I was very impressed by like the kind of social political commentary that was going on in the show, and
Totally.
how almost simply it was being spoken about, while still being articulated so well. Like I was very like fascinated by the moment between, of course I'm gonna forget names, Storm and what's her name, Fireworks Girl.
And and Jubilee,
Yeah, I think it was. Oh, you know what? It wasn't Jubilee. It was. And again, the other name I
Jean
completely.
Grey.
Yeah. No. Yes. 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 It was Storm and Jean. They were talking.
Yeah,
Yeah. That conversation. I was just very much impressed by the writing. I was like, oh, I can't believe. I was just shocked at how good it was, and I'm kind of young, but I never watched like the original series, so I don't even have like a lot of like the context that like other people have. So I didn't know what I was getting into, but I heard a lot of good things, and I started watching, and I was just so impressed by the storytelling, and the characters are so fun. And I will say, if someone, I'm those people, or one of those people who come from a lot of like the movie context. So like, I'm only just started now to see like the different variations of characters, and to see the X-Men done in this way that feels very different from the movies.
hmm
Was nice to see and nice to explore. So I was just like Wolverine, Wolverine in the show is like so much not the same thing as Wolverine from the
yeah, yeah,
movies.
yeah.
And I like it though. I was like, oh, this is fascinating, and it's nice to see how these characters are reacting to kind of like these older backstories that have been being like created for a while now, for years and decades now. So I'm just like, I'm new here and I'm having fun is how I feel.
Good,
Yeah.
good, because usually the X-Men makes people so frustrated they leave and they never come back.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. But Brian in the chat is saying that anytime we have someone on the show and they mention X-Men, I use it as an excuse to just talk about X-Men. So I'm going to put a purposeful stop to that and ask the questions that I actually meant to get to today. So you said you're a little bit newer to some of the comic book stuff, or maybe like the MCU and everything. But how did you get started in comics? How did you go from just like a person who hangs out in life to work, teaching, and now you're making comic books?
Yeah. So, well, I graduated from University of the Arts in Philadelphia in 2020. And so for the whole year after, I was, now officially out of school. And, I'm like I'm living with my parents. I'm trying to figure out how to make my way as an artist. And my big goal at the time was I really wanted to get into animation. And I just recognized pretty quickly after graduating where how my art just wasn't kind of like up to par with where I think it needed to be to get in. And so I started like
hmm
completely like redoing my entire portfolio. I started like redrawing and redesigning, and like I'll draw something and draw it again the next day and then draw it again like a week from later. Like I just kept redrawing until I thought things were up to par. And I think funny enough, that put me in a sweet spot for the Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur series, because Scholastics reached out, and because I was putting stuff on Instagram, they're like, "Hey, you want to do this Marvel book?" And I was like, "Yes, I do want to do this Marvel book."
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, "Thanks for asking." So that was like a year after I graduated, and that was my first comic book deal ever, and it's the only comic book I've done up to that point. And so I was working on that for 3 years. I was working on that for like a long time, and then it came out, and then now I'm in the industry essentially. Like that was my first book deal. It was with Scholastics and Marvel, and it came out, and now I'm doing other. I have other things coming up, so I'm in the comics industry, which is awesome. I love it.
That is so cool. I wanted to ask for the Moon Girl Devil Dinosaur book, the writer was Stephanie Williams.
Hmm.
What was that like collaborating with her? I've read like a few of her comics. I think she's done some of the Living Single, but it's like the superhero spin on it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
how was that like as like your first foray to work with like such like a cool author?
Yeah, I gotta say I'm very lucky. I mean, I feel like she's just been holding my hand as I make my way through the industry. Like she's just been such a pillar. Well, since I've been here, and as I'm sure you might have heard from many other artists, like working on the story, I didn't have any communication with her. I was just kind of like got some of her notes. But the thing that where I knew I was in good hands was when I have a few characters in the story that I had to design from scratch,
Mm.
and to get their skin tone, she gave me the Fenty foundation numbers, and I was like, oh,
Yes.
perfect. I was like, whoever this is amazing. So but then as like after the series is done, I reached out, and me and her kind of became friendly, and she has given me so much insight on the industry, and things that she's working on and how she navigates. And I feel like she's just such an amazing person. I mean, she's just so talented. um she's such a hard worker. She's very kind. So it's been amazing, because like that was my first essentially connection, especially to an author in the industry, and it's probably one of the best ones I could have had. So
Oh, that's
Heck yeah.
incredible. So I'm curious. So Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur Wreck and Roll is a fun little story. I read through it a little while ago. I'm curious. Are you a roller derby fan, or was that just had you experienced roller derby before getting into the book or something? Because I feel like that's it's a very niche thing, but like it's done so well in the comic book. So I guess what was your experience with that?
so I don't have any connection to roller derby. I very much
Okay.
have I guess somewhat of a background in like skating, like like doing skate birthday parties was the thing when I was a kid. So
Oh
I
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, I've been to a lot of skating rinks, and I used to do inlines, which has been a while, and I want to get back to it. So I definitely have like some connection to skating, but I've never have had a connection to roller derby in particular. But it was a lot of fun. Like I love doing the research and looking at like kind of like the
Hmm.
clothes, and like trying to like bring it to life, especially with the main team. The Sleigh Train is the name of the group that I had to design, and I had to design their outfits, and it was just such a good time. Very much doing this blend of roller derby, but kind of like tech futurism to get their outfits. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, just learning about the sport, and as a lover of fashion, anything fashion related makes me happy. So just being able to like bring those things into the story was like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and they look really fun. Like the outfits for that team in particular, especially when they're in their like their what do they call second or backup gig or whatever outfits is like it's very high tech and cool. Like it's very fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed that part of the book. Just like the big back and forth. I mean, I was it's a book aimed at younger audiences, but it's still like very fun to kind of see it all coming. Just be like, oh no, what's she gonna do? Like it's such a fun little story with that.
Yeah.
And I feel like action sequences in the book are really cool. Like you get the like the speed lines and stuff. It looks very very well done.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I feel like it's funny. I don't like naturally gravitate towards a lot of action related stuff, but it's almost like it is where I come from in terms of like a student, in the sense of like for me, it's more like Looney Tunes is where I get my sense of like action and stuff
Yeah,
from.
yeah, sure.
But when I get to do like action related things, it's always a fun time. Like it's just so much fun, like seeing how far you can push the human body and anatomy, and like create these like really like fun experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so, speaking of things like Looney Tune, I guess like when you're working on books or you're reading things, you're taking inspiration. I guess like what do you typically gravitate towards? Is it all like cartoons and animation? I mean, clearly you're reading some slightly darker stuff as well. So like, where do you go to for inspiration?
Yeah, I very much pull from both animation and comics. Like again,
Hmm.
my biggest thing I always have in the back of my head is kind of Giant Days. That's kind of like my big inspiration. Yeah, I know. I
Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss.
love that. I mean, talk about like physical comedy. Like what a wonderfully drawn comic book. So coming from Scott Pilgrim, coming from Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, Wander Over Yonder. I can name cartoons for days. Okay, KO.
I love it. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, so like I try and pull from both of those things, and even like other comics I've seen on like webtoons and just like out of box type things. Uh, and I feel like I'm very much a student of kind of slapstick cartoon era.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say like my most favorite thing is expressions, and I take a lot of inspiration from One Piece, my favorite anime of all time. Yeah.
Okay, so we're all best friends. That's fine. Great. I'm glad we solidified this relationship today.
Yes, I am the biggest like One Piece. Well, I'll say one of the biggest One Piece fans. But like
Sure.
I absolutely adore the way Ichiro Oda plays with expressions, and it's something that kind of like initially fostered my love for One Piece. And so I take a lot of inspiration from like how to stretch and pull expressions as much as I possibly can, and you kind of like see that in my work.
That's amazing. I mean, so were you like just like have you gone crazy since like the reveal of the latest gear, like the big giant Nika god Luffy up in the sky? I mean, like who basically becomes a living cartoon character. I mean, like,
Yes.
is that the greatest reveal in the world for you or what?
So it's actually funny because like when it first was happening, I was kind of like, how do I feel about this? Because I think I heard some criticism of like, maybe
Okay.
it's like too goofy, but I was just like, no, but it's so fun. It's so much fun
Mhm.
for him to like have that development and just the way they play with it, the animation. It was very much like a heart racing moment. I was like, this is why One Piece is my favorite anime of all time, because I always feel like I'm constantly on the edge of my seat, especially with its sense of storytelling and character development. And so to see
Sure.
Luffy kind of gain this new height um, was super impressive. I guess I want to know more. Like I got to Egghead Island. I'm like almost done, and then I got to get back. I have to get back to everything I've ever started.
Yeah.
So like, I just feel like I would like to know more about Luffy and Gear 5. And like a part of me is like I feel like I have like I don't want it to get too mystical. I don't know. It's like I don't want to stray. One Piece already completely strays away from like being like down to earth, in its storytelling. But like
Yeah.
it's almost like I would just like to know what we mean when we say God. I like what does this mean? Like how much power are we being given? Like I just want to make sure we're not
Yes.
going too out, because at that point it doesn't feel like One Piece anymore. It feels like we're kind of outside
Right.
somewhere else. But yeah,
There feels to be like this is a One Piece podcast now. This is what's happening. But there feels to be like there is a groundedness, and I hate that like you said, it's not like realistic, but there is like an understanded like thing where everybody is still fallible, right? Like everybody can be defeated. And so yeah, I totally know what you mean by saying this god status thing kind of puts us in Dragon Ball Z territory, where you're kind of just like, well
yeah,
then you're like in this infinite power scale thing that doesn't feel right. And while One Piece clearly has a power scale that we're getting to, and like Kaido was an entire thing that felt like the next step
yeah,
up, right?
yeah,
There does need to be like a limitation on this, that to keep it a little bit grounded for whatever that means. I totally am right there with you.
yeah, yeah.
Man, okay, good. I like this. We're on the same page about this. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Um, Paloma, move us away from One Piece or else.
Honestly.
Yes. Asia, earlier you mentioned like what makes you like the MCU, or like being open to like the MCU changing things up is because you're an enjoyer of fan fiction. May I ask, what fan fiction do you gravitate to? What are like the series or like pop culture properties that you're like, this is some good fanfic?
To be honest, it's like 99% MCU stuff.
Incredible.
Awesome.
It's like sometimes I'll dabble outside and do other stuff, but it's mostly Marvel stuff for some reason. I'm trying to think if there's just anything else that I gravitate. It's mostly Marvel. I can't even remember the other things I read because that's almost everything I read. So
Any particular characters?
I'll name one person and I'll say Iron Man, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's totally fine.
I got it. Okay. I love Tony Stark. I love playing with characters that are very intelligent, whether that's on the scale of like, chaotic good or chaotic evil or whatever. I just love exploring the mind and how far we can, we're pushing people and what people are willing to do. I don't know. I love reading anything about Tony Stark because there's so much you can do with him as like an intelligent person. And same thing with like a Loki. I love just the crazy stories and concepts people come up with for them. It's just so good.
Well, there's a run of I think it's Loki as well as like Young Avengers. I don't know if you haven't read it by Kieran Gillen. I could send you some links. If you want to see Loki being the cleverest, most tricksteriest guy you've ever seen, I think you would like those runs.
Oh my
So I
gosh,
can,
yes.
I'll send you a list or something after we finish recording.
Okay, please.
But so okay, you love Tony Stark. Thoughts then on the other big brains of the Marvel universe, right? We've got Professor X. Technically, I mean, not in the MCU really, but we've got Reed Richards and eventually Doctor Doom, who will technically probably maybe be Iron Man gone bad.
Yeah.
Curious, what are your thoughts on the other big brains then in there? I mean, I guess Bruce Banner's also in that line too.
Okay, so I will say I'm a big Bruce Banner fan. I think he's fascinating from like a psychological, how do I say, like mental health standpoint. I'm interested in Banner and how it's explored how he himself emotionally is dealing with his own essentially monstrosity and all that. I love that with a Banner, but then with the other ones, to be honest, I don't know. They don't do enough for me. I guess I don't know how I would describe it. I don't want to call myself an edgelord because that's not true. But like, I think they're just not cheeky enough for me. I think I'm fascinated. Like it's cool. They're smart, but they're not. They don't. And okay, I'll say that as someone who's also not read a lot of them. So with that being said, I don't actually have like as much context with them.
No. I think you're nailing it.
Okay, yeah, because even like I don't have a lot of the context of like Tony Stark in the comics, which I've looked into a bit, and I was like, damn, he's this bad. But like, at least in the movies, I'm like, but there's so much heart, and he's so cheeky, so fascinating, he's so fun, and like same thing with Loki, like he's so cheeky and like mysterious, and the what is it? What's the term I'm looking for? I don't know, but it's just like the chaoticness of him. Is so much fun to me, and like I don't get that with the other ones. I'm like, yeah, you're smart, but so what? It's not that interesting alone.
They need to have a little bit of like a smart aleckness to them, right? They need to be a little bit of a smart ass and also pretty smart at the same time, right?
And then anyone who's too lawful good, I'm not the biggest fan of. I gotta say, like, I'm kind of a Captain America hater. Don't tell me, but just a little bit.
All right, well we're got to stop the show now because I feel like no, I'm just kidding. No, that's great. That's really, and I totally can understand that. I feel like it's going to be very interesting. This is the MCU speculation corner now to see where they take this Doctor Doom played by Robert Downey Jr., which I know has been like memed to death, but also like, how is he going to approach this? Is it just going to be a really smart bad guy who's got a smart mouth? Is that what we're going to get? I'm not mad about that a little bit. I'm like, I'm a big Doctor Doom like fan in general, and I feel like the superior reigning lord who's just higher than thou persona is not as fun as like a I'm smarter than you and also the bad guy vibe. I really like that.
Agreed, and I gotta say, like I'm a huge fan of like Robert Downey Jr.'s acting, and I just feel like regardless of what we get, I have a hard time believing he's gonna mess it up. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
If things around it aren't so great, that's one thing. But I have faith, so I'm excited to see it as well.
All right, when all these new movies come out, we're having you back, and then we're going to just do a retrospective. I'm so excited.
Please.
Paloma, do you have any last questions, I think, here before we wrap up? I've got one more that I want to end us on.
I think I'm all set on my questions. Got my good fanfic answers.
Good. Well, then I'm curious, Asia, for folks that are curious, what is the project that you're working on next? Or if it's too underground or under wraps, I mean, that's understandable. But are you working on anything next that people could look out for?
So I am, but I don't think I'm allowed to say anything yet. I haven't even gotten as far as like signing things yet. So like, things are very early, but it seems like there's things to go. I will say it's 2 bigger things. So it's definitely exciting to look for. I'm trying to think if I can even, I probably shouldn't say anything. I feel like it's so early, but we'll be seeing them. If everything goes well, I should be seeing them probably the end of next year or maybe not too long after. So not too long from now. Yeah, but things are just getting started. But I got some good stuff coming, so it's exciting.
Awesome. Hopefully, like not a 3-year wait like the last one, right?
No, hopefully not. No. I don't think so.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, this has been an absolute blast. I guess for other folks that are curious, where can they find you on the internet if they want to reach out, if they want to follow what you're working on next?
Yeah, if you want to follow me, check out what I'm doing, reach out. You should definitely follow me on Instagram. My name is Asia_Simone 405. I could tell you other places, but honestly, I don't do much on anything else. So you should probably just find me on Instagram. If you want to, if you want to reach out, feel free. My DMs are open, but also email. I don't, for whatever reason, if people want to contact me, you can do that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we'll make sure to put links to your website, your Instagram in the show notes and stuff. But this has been an absolute blast. I'm so glad we got to get into the mind of Asia Simone, talk comics and everything. But I'll say, I guess, thank you to everyone listening live. This has been a blast. Thank you to everyone on Discord. Thank you to everyone listening out there on the internet. Brian was a proof listener. Thank you for doing that. Thank you to Zander, our editor. Next week's episode is a pre-recorded episode that I'm pretty sure is maybe going to be, couple weeks we're gonna have a Transformers episode that may be the most controversial thing we've ever put out, but next week's episode is gonna be really good. It's got Danny, Kate, and Renee are gonna be talking about a manga that they all read, so that's gonna be fun. But I guess we'll wrap things up here. I'll say thank you to everyone out there. You're all fantastic human beings, and until next time, comics are good and so are you.